All right, everyone, time to weigh in again on Brexit, because it looks like Brexit is assured to happen, but Theresa May over in the UK has managed to create a proposed Brexit deal for the EU, which they may not even, by the way, accept, which would almost be a saving grace for the English people at this moment. I'll tell you why. She's managed to create a deal that's actually worse than not having a Brexit at all. Like, it would be better to just remain in the EU. The problem being, of course, you can't at this point do it. You've already invoked Article 13. The EU's already said you're out. So you can't remain. But the thing is, there are a lot of people in Britain that do want to remain. So they hammer out, I guess, a deal here in which they say, okay, we're going to be independent. But we're not going to have free movement, even though we know the EU probably will force it on us anyway. And by the way, we're going to adhere by the EU rules on large segments of our economy without even having a seat at the table voting on those rules. So the EU will literally be able, to the people of the UK, what this appears to essentially mean is that the European Union would be able to bilk you entirely and rob you blind, and you wouldn't be able to do butt-fuck about it. That's essentially what this means. At least when you were within the EU, you had a seat at the table. Not a big one, disproportionately unrepresented, subject to draconian rules that were screwing with your industries. That's why there was a Brexit vote in the first place. That's why it was accepted, because of social alienation rising up. And I'm going to warn you. I'm giving you an actual warning here. This looks a lot like the sort of thing that would happen around the Treaty of Versailles. That is, a deal comes forth, political and diplomatic endeavor, and you become subjugated, essentially, to what will become a larger economic power. The European Union has more economic might than the UK does alone. Which, by the way, that's not a Remain statement. They'll try to use it as one, but that's bullshit. All you simply have to do is have a hard Brexit and say, fuck the EU, and you can trade with everyone else at a whim. That's all you have to do. You don't need to worry about it. Your economy can take that strain. They're the ones that probably end up suffering at that point, but Theresa May has managed to convince a lot of people that's not the case. What will happen then is that over time, eventually you'll have a significant economic downturn. And much like the Treaty of Versailles, it'll be used as a talking point by fringe movements that you will no longer be able to suppress because too many people will begin joining them. And it could result in the overhaul of the entire establishment order of the UK. Now, that could be good, but it could also be very bad, as we've seen throughout history. Yeah, there have been revolutions and things that have led to many positive results. There have been more that have led to very negative results. Is that really what the English people want? Is that really what the Scottish might vote to leave at that point? They'll be so socially alienated that the UK will collapse. It will break up into several nations. Now, Wales probably not, and it's like, well, we got sheep, we don't care. North Ireland could be like, fuck you, bye, go back with actual Ireland, which, by the way, give Ireland back to the Irish. And then the Scottish could become their own country, leaving, England and Wales as this almost a microstate at that point. Very small, economically backwards country that will have continuous problems in trade with its nearest neighbors. You'll be surrounded by people who are somewhat economically hostile towards your interests. It's worse than having no Brexit. Like, a hard Brexit is basically the UK slaps the EU in the face, says we're abolishing everything. Basically, where it's going to take years to hammer out any trade terms. Everything has to be renegotiated. In the meantime, you're trading, I guess, with your Commonwealth states. It's like, yeah, you've got friends in the world, the US and Canada and Australia and India. You don't need the European Union. Why do you need them? Like most of the Western European countries with all the money, they're not importing your shit anyway. They're getting it from Germany. So there's one possibility. Yeah, there's a soft Brexit where you try to hammer out a proposal that, keeps at least a little bit of connection there. But this one's worse. This is a soft Brexit plus the UK saying we're so weak we want to abide by rules we don't even vote on. How does that make any sense? This will cause alienation down the road. Not immediately. So long as times are good economically, if a population's not under financial stress, typically there's no real revolutionary rhetoric. There's no significant fervor. Because people don't feel antagonized. They don't feel alienated. They're like, well, I got mine. I got my picket fence and my 2-car garage and my dog and, my apple trees out front. I'm not starving. I can make my bills, my payments. I've got a job. It's a decent job. No, there's no reason for me to vote out the establishment that exists because I feel positive about things. The next time, though, that you have a significant downturn in the UK, which is inevitable, countries have economic downturns once in a while, even under the best capitalistic circumstances. Just think of how commonly they happen under, interventionist systems without free trade, like we see in the world today. Oh, that's why you have more economic downturns in the last century. That's why it happens more often, because of the rise of interventionism replacing free markets. It's not capitalism's fault, it's the absence of capitalism causing problems. Here's the thing, it's the government's intervention. The UK will eventually have a recession or something. Groups that you don't like and you won't want to be governed by will harangue, and they will find fertile ground for their message. And it won't be like a UKIP. You call UKIP Nazis and stuff. It's like they just want to Brexit, and they're like, hey, tone down some of the political correctness and we want like our fishing waters back. UKIP's turning into a free speech, like almost a quasi-libertarian movement. In the Sargon left libertarian vein, I will say. Which, left libertarianism, it's like, okay, classical liberalism, whatever. Instead of having a UKIP party that's led by someone who has a pint and smiles and cracks a joke like a Nigel Farage, you're going to have something far darker and more malevolent. And you're also going to get the natural reaction, which is far-right groups. Of course, tongue-in-cheek there. You'll get communists, you'll get socialist movements, you'll get, all sorts of fascist movements and stuff. And you're not going to be able to ban them. We're in the information age. You're moving towards dystopia anyway, and the EU is definitely ahead of you on that count. I would warn the people of the UK to reject this deal. You need to be protesting. If millions of people don't protest this, it will mean that the UK might as well just go with the Chequers deal. You might as well be subjugated by a foreign power, because it will show that the government of the UK is inept and the people of the UK are too ambivalent to govern their own affairs, too ambivalent to care. You go out and riot by the thousands if your soccer team loses, but it looks like you might end up getting literally subjugated. Like Nigel Farage, when campaigning for Brexit, he's like, well, foreign power is making most of our own laws, and we barely get any say. We can't really get anything accomplished. And he was right, by the way. This is even worse. You don't even have representation in name. You won't even have the illusion of having any choice about the direction of your country. The UK will be a situation where the EU can agree to some new rule that screws every fishery that you have in your country, and you won't be able to stop it. They'll be able to screw automotive and give your car manufacturing capabilities Germany, and you won't be able to do anything. Why are they not going to? The natural inclination in such a lopsided situation is that the EU, especially Western Europe, will vote itself more money by screwing the UK and leeching its economy. It is inevitable. It will happen. It'll happen because you've enabled it to happen. You've rolled over and allowed somebody to abuse you, and then you're saying, but please be benevolent with us. Do you honestly think, of all bodies in the entire world, that Brussels is going to do that? Or do you think that they are going to harshly punish you over time for your insolence at voting for a Brexit in the first place? It's going to be the latter. And when other countries, by the way, see this, some other countries may have their own referendums. They'll say, screw this. And by the way, we're doing a hard Brexit. And then the UK, once again, will be left continuously more abused. And eventually there will be a fervor against it. Other parties will rise up, collapse the center, which is already happening anyway within the European Union states. It's happened here, within the Republican Party. It's happening everywhere in the world, actually. It's happening in East Africa with a reaction to Chinese colonialism. It'll eventually happen in China as their economy continues to dwindle. Liberal movements, which there are outside of the establishment, may very well rise up. We may see a weird situation in which Europe is a patchwork of quasi-communist and fascistic nativist states, the US is run by populism, and China becomes a liberal democracy. Wouldn't that be hilarious? Don't say that it can't happen. Don't say it can't. Learn a little bit of world history, study politics, study political history if you want to see these things clearly. This is too much like the Treaty of Versailles for my liking, and I say that as someone who's not affected directly by it because I don't live in the UK. I think it's a horrible idea. I think you'd be better off just telling the EU to screw off and subjugating yourself truly to the American sphere at that point, or working with your Commonwealth states. You'd be better off, yeah, temporarily. You'd probably go into a recession. At least it wouldn't be permanent. At least you'd be able to claw your way back out of it like a normal nation. You won't be able to do that if the EU can still make rules that are binding for you. And by the way, again, the EU might not accept it. What's going to happen to your markets now that Theresa May puts forth something that says, well, there will be no free movement? The EU may balk at that, and they may reject it and say, no, we're not, hammer out a different deal. We don't want this one. It's very funny that the EU, you can leave the EU, but you have to get them to agree to whatever terms you can put forth. The EU is going to therefore abuse you as much as possible, and Theresa May just offered them on a golden platter something that, other than having no free movement, gives them everything they could possibly want, and the UK is stuck with nothing. That's not bargaining from a position of strength. She should read Art of the Deal. She should have Trump negotiate as a proxy. You should kick the Queen out. It'll be King Trump or something. That'd be funny. That's about all. Peace out.